And once we get them in, we can just kind of have like 10 minutes to just go over any quick like questions that they think they have with like how the structured or whatever. But
Okay.
I'm pretty good to go. I'm just like hammering a sandwich here, so.
I had my nonna stracciatella before, so we're good. We're good for the next hour. Channel BAS Roma. Channel.
Let's go get a water real quick. Be right back.
Yeah.
Order from our favorite Thai restaurant. Across town. That's Burger Chains. With the GPS, I know exactly when my food arrives. The Italian's here. TransGetTheDishes.com. Enjoy $7 off your first order. As King Midas, I expect the best of everything, and so should you. Visit Midas and get a free winter maintenance package.
All right, cool.
In the background, I got first take on, so like the hot takes are real right now.
I was just about to throw that on too.
It's good TV, man. Like I may
It's
not
not
agree.
bad. Yeah.
I may not agree with a lot of what they say, and a lot of it's just inflammatory and controversial. But like, they get the numbers, man.
Absolutely. What's his name's good too? That I listen to like on my commutes from work, to and from work is Colin Coward.
Yeah, him too. He's the same like brand, you know. He's inflammatory. He's opinionated, and it's like at the end of the day, a lot of people tune in.
The thing is, I like about his show is that, like, I'm not a huge fan of like the whole like centric of like one sport. I like the fact that like he'll have a segment, he'll have like football. I like a little taste of everything, even if I'm not like a big basketball fan. I like the whole like, oh, okay, so we're gonna have something to talk about like the Sixers, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of cool. Like it's a little bit different. I'm getting my taste without it being like political and this, because I don't watch ESPN or Sports Center, to be honest.
I feel you. No, I definitely feel you on that. Because my boys, we're all soccer fans, like most of us, you know, like the good part of us. But now we have 2-3 of our best friends that are big basketball heads. So I've been watching a lot of basketball over the past 2-3 years and playing a lot. So like, I need something that kind of like talks about both. Like, let's say they're not the best soccer knowledge. You know what? I'll get my soccer knowledge elsewhere, but I'll still get it in the podcast with like basketball.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like Cowherd, yeah, they don't. But the thing is, with ESPN and all these guys, they go into the politics way too much. They talk about Kaepernick for like an hour.
It's like, oh my gosh, I don't care. Like, the thing is, like, a lot of these people. I mean, listen, I don't care either way. Like, I'm not a big Kaepernick fan. Like I don't care either way. Like, it'll be like every time a quarterback gets released from like a shitty team, oh, they should pop Kaepernick. I'm like, no, they have 3 quarterbacks. They're the Browns. Like, it's like, no, they did that with the. They asked what's his name, the coach of the Packers or something. They're like, oh, so are you gonna look at Kaepernick? He's like, I have 2 quarterbacks that are under contract. Like, I can't pay a third. Like,
yeah, no, the guy he literally said, he's like, yo, they've been at the team with the team for like 4 years now.
Yeah, like, come on, like
like
give me a break.
They know the playbook.
It's ridiculous. And they're like, oh, they should sign him. I'm like, no, are you even looking at the entire picture? Or are you just saying like, oh, they need a quarterback and they should sign Kaepernick? Like, are you looking at the finances? Are you looking at all these different things? Like, they're not.
The only team that should sign Kaepernick, and it's going to sound harsh, it's going to sound kind of mean, it's going to sound a bit opportunist, to be honest with you. The only team that should sign Kaepernick is a team that wants to not focus on football, but is a good marketing team.
Browns.
But you know what? If you want to market your NFL team right now, you sign Colin Kaepernick. Forget about the rest.
Right? I agree. Negative or positive? I mean, you'll get publicity.
You'll get everything. Negative, positive, both. You know what? Depends though. Like you're on the field. Like it's not gonna really focus on the field that much.
Did you send out the invites?
I did.
All right, let me see. I'll just follow up with
those I sent. Email refreshed. Okay, so you want to start with Roma Lazio, right?
Yeah. We could talk about Tavecchio a little bit. You know, or maybe reactions for the whole situation, and then we can dive into pretty much I guess what the order of the games were this weekend. So Roma Lazio was first, and then I guess Milan Napoli.
Okay.
And then we could go. I mean, I was going to touch on Inter Atalanta, but that was only if I was able to get Adam on.
The thing with Inter Atalanta, look, I say we go Roma Lazio, Milan Napoli, Juve Samp, like we said.
I agree.
And then
questions.
And then with if we really, because look, 1, 2, that's 1, 2, 3, Lazio 4. If we really, because I think we need to touch on Inter, man, just even briefly, just because of how well they're doing.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, I don't think Solano's going to be able to hang around that long, so like we can introduce him, and then we can kind of treat it as like he's calling in as a guest.
Maybe
so when he joins this Google Hangout, we'll just tell him like that's how it's going to be, and then it'll be just me, you, and Marco, I guess, for like Juve, Samp, and then the rest of the stuff.
So to me, like maybe we don't talk about Inter Atalanta as Inter versus Atalanta. I think we talk about it as not a match recap, but like Inter. Okay, this is a side that's like I think they have 10 wins and 3 draws, no losses.
No, yeah, you're right, and they have like Icardi is 13 goals in 13 games, like all these different things. So,
but like to me, we don't. Let's not even say that. Okay, yeah, we'll mention they beat Atlanta, obviously, but like. I don't find there are points to talk about the game itself.
No, I don't think so either. I think go like a kind of like skim over like, okay, this was the result, 3-2, yada yada yada. And you can go, what was your take on, how do you think Spalletti's done so far? Did you expect him to be doing this good of a job right from the jump? Like something like that. Like
like to me, Inter, when we talk about them, is exactly all the points you mentioned, reiterate their record, talk about Spalletti, highlight Icardi, and talk about Skriniar a bit.
Right.
To me, like that is the full Inter recap. That's like just quality, bro. You got to talk about Skriniar. You got to talk about Icardi. Spalletti's doing bits too. Like that's where Adam could have really come into play. Like maybe he knows an underrated aspect of the team that like us, like non-Inter fans, aren't picking up. Mm-hmm. But this is the general outline, for, like in my opinion.
Yeah. So Marco says 2:30. I guess he's going to be coming on in like 8 minutes, and then Solano says 2 to 3. So
he says what?
2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Then we finish with, because that's Tavecchio, the 3 games. Are we doing the Champions League?
We could. I mean, it's really up to you. I mean, there's one thing like we can. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we should focus on like maybe we can go. Like pick the Champions League game as the focus of the that area of Europe. But I mean the Europa League, I think it's kind of beating a dead horse. It's like, all right, Milan, Austria, like why are we gonna like I don't think it's gonna really matter that we talk about that. Like it's gonna be too dragged on because we're gonna talk about 6 European games. Like that's a lot.
We got Napoli, Shakhtar. I'm just looking at all the games now.
That's a must win for Napoli at home.
You got Atletico, Roma, and you got Juve, Barca. Okay, so if breaking it down for what these games are actually worth, Napoli are in a must-win game for sure, but they have a foot into the Europa League.
Right.
You look at Atletico, Roma. Roma's already qualified. Boom.
Yeah.
The thing is, are they going to finish first? Are they going to finish second? Obviously, that's a storyline, but is it a storyline for this podcast? I don't know. Then you have Juve, Barca. Like even as a Juve fan, this game is at Juve. Like. You just have a feeling Juve's gonna qualify regardless.
What if we do it this way? What if
these games are uninspiring?
What if we break it up this way? What if when we were talking about Roma Lazio, then we kind of dive into Roma Atletico, and then that'll be John's portion, and then we can have Marco to talk about Juve Samp and then Juve Barca.
Okay, Juve Samp.
This way John gets his full spot to talk about like anything upcoming Roma.
That's what I like. I really like the way you broke that one down.
And then this way, because everyone knows Marco's a Juve guy, and then John's a Roma guy. So we'll get John's part out of the way, then he can bow out, and then we can kind of finish up with Marco and do the questions with him.
And in between John and Marco, when we talk about Milan-Napoli, it could be then just a brief discussion on Napoli's upcoming game against Shakhtar.
The thing is, though, is that Roberto asked the question to John.
True. Okay.
So, I mean, it's up to you how you want. I mean, if you wanted to integrate that question, if you wanted to mix the question in, I don't know how you want to do it. Like, if you wanted to say, like, we got a question from one of our blah, blah, blah. This is for John. We can kind of – I just want to see when he hops on, though. Because when he hops – is he on? Hello. There you go. There you go. I was talking to someone. What's going on?
How's it going?
Good, man. All right, so we're just going over like the next few minutes just to go over the little rundown of what we have planned. You guys
Cool.
tell us if you guys have any questions or any concerns with that. John, we know you kind of under a time thing here, so what we're planning on doing is, having you and Marco and all of us kind of discuss Tavecchio, and then we're going to get into Roma Lazio, and then we're also going to get Atletico Roma. This way, you can kind of get your portion out of the way, and then you can kind of leave it as you need to. And then when we transition into Serie A, we'll do Juve Samp and Juve Barca with Marco, and then kind of wrap from there.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Sounds perfect. All right. So, any questions, guys? You guys good to go?
Ready when you guys are.
Yeah, I'm good whenever you guys are.
Perfect. So, Matt, you want to take us in?
The podcast. No, you do this one.
Sure thing. Let me just lower the TV. Got first take on in the back over here. I'm going to start it, guys, in 10 seconds. Just so I'm going to have a flatline silence of 10 seconds. So when I edit, it's going to be pretty easy.
Awesome.
Welcome to the third episode of Italian Football Daily's podcast. Today we've got a stacked lineup, lots to talk about in Italian football. Of course, Carlo Tavecchio resigning. There was a big weekend in Serie A with some big matches that we're all going to recap. I'm Gregory Caltabanis. I'm joined by my co-host Matthew Santangelo. And we also got some special guests for you guys to break this all down for you. IFTV's Marco Messina and AS Roma Press editor John Solano. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good,
How you guys
thanks.
doing?
Very happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on, guys. We really appreciate it. So, obviously, the big news today, we all kind of expected it, but we never thought he'd go ahead and do it. Carlo Tavecchio resigns in a fiery post press conference after his resignation itself. I am personally happy with the resignation. I was calling for it ever since Italy were eliminated, but to me, it's just like the first piece of a puzzle here. What are your guys' thoughts on the resignation?
I mean, I felt that obviously I had the same thoughts on it as you do, Greg. I just felt that it was needed. Obviously, along with Ventura getting sacked last week, I think that they needed to clean house, and it really would start at the top with Tavecchio. I think you really do need fresh ideas, fresh visions at the top, overseeing everything in Italian football. And, for me, I mean, aside from the fact that, his comments in the past, I mean, that just, self-explanatory right there. He needed to step down, and I'm at least glad he did. But, man, what a way to go out. It was pretty awkward to listen to some of his comments, I'm not going to lie. Third person speaking and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It was really bizarre, the approach he took today, which, yeah, I tweeted out he was attempting to go scorched earth, but he came off a lot worse, I think, in my opinion, than maybe he intended to. Yeah, I can understand the approach of you have nothing to lose at this point, so let it all fly. But listen, we know who the guy is. He's had stupid comments from even before he was officially handed the post when he was voted in. So this doesn't shock me whatsoever to see him make these ridiculous statements to sort of grandstand and try to deflect off the blame from himself. It was just really, really bizarre. His entire tenure was bizarre. And, for him to not resign the second Italy did not qualify, it was just absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And for him to sort of attempt to take credit for things like giving Serie A, 4 Champions League spots, absolutely ridiculous in my opinion.
I also thought it was real quick. I also thought it was kind of weird in a way. And I mean, although we all have our opinions of Ventura and how he coached and how he, failed to get Italy to the World Cup, the fact that he really threw Ventura under the bus like that much, I felt that was really not the way to do it. He really didn't. Again, like you just said, he tried to deflect everything against him. And he's like, oh, but Ventura should have done this. And he was at fault. And it was just a bad look for Italian football altogether.
I mean, nobody. I mean, after what happened, I mean, nobody's going to praise Ventura. At this point, it's almost like beating a dead horse. Like, we get it. Horrible manager, horrible appointment. like, let's get beyond that. Like, I would like to think that everyone unilaterally at this point agrees on that already.
You have someone like Marcello Lippi coming out saying, I spoke with Gasperini, Montella, and Ventura before the hiring, and I even informed Tavecchio of my choice. And now you have, which wasn't Ventura, and now you have Tavecchio coming out and saying, oh, it wasn't me who picked Ventura. No one in this federation is assuming responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue
That's
right
the problem.
here. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
Marco,
I think
Marco, you want to add?
I agree with everything you guys said. I mean, I think that most people, most logic people agree too. And the thing that I just keep thinking, or kept thinking before, you know, as everyone was so optimistic about our rebuilding, was 2010, Italy fails in the World Cup. The group stage is out. 2014, out. And you would think that at that point we'd be like, damn, Italy, who are on top of the world 11 years ago, 11 years ago winning the World Cup, would be able to change and find this new structure. But yet again, we still stayed in the same thing. And for 2018, we can't even qualify for the World Cup. So to not take responsibility for something like that is ridiculous. And to see a guy like Lippi and Prandelli, this is for Ventura's point of view, resigning the day after this tragedy happens, and then to stick up for it, saying I was the best coach, one of the best in 40 years. And I think that in this situation, Tavecchio failed. Anyone who appointed Ventura failed. You need to accept responsibility that you hired the wrong coach. Stop blaming others. And I think that that's not what Tavecchio did under his tenure. And I'm glad he's resigning. I don't like to say, you know, a guy losing his job, you know, I'm happy about that. But with what Tavecchio's done, I think that I was really happy. And I don't like the way he even went out. I turned off the press conference after watching it because it seemed like one of those things that's like, I'm sorry that you were offended by this. Like, he wasn't really apologizing. That's what I took from it, at least.
It's quite frankly ridiculous. And they asked Andrea Barzagli, the Juventus defender, about his thoughts about all this and like underlining the path ahead. And I think he really hit the nail on the head today when he said, "We need a project for the and I quote, we need a project for the next 10 years. We need to start again with young players and follow what Germany did." Germany famously dubbed it Das Reboot, where after they failed, really took to investing in their youth ranks, in their local talent, and really turned that page around. And once again, obviously, as we saw in 2014, became the world champions again. And I think that's the only way Italian football could pick itself up again. And now with Tavecchio gone, it's finally possible, in my opinion.
Yeah, the thing that worries me the most, though, is nearly every club voted for this guy. And the people who voted for this guy are primarily still at their respective clubs. So, you know, the second he made those, you know, horrible comments, the racist comments before he was even elected, and yet he still manages to get elected president of the FIGC, it worries me a little bit in regards to, well, let's say someone else comes along. I mean, the club's judge and character, it just seems horrific, if I'm honest. I mean, you had every club except for Juve and Roma vote for him in his initial candidacy. And then in March, when you had the re-elections, only Roma voted against him. And I think it just shows that this is probably a good time, too, for even clubs to reflect on, you know, the direction we want Italian football to go in.
No, I totally agree with you on that. And no, I did an article for These Football Times and kind of talked about some of those similar things. And I think it's not only a couple of the dominoes that fell here. Obviously, Ventura's gone, Tavecchio stepped aside, but it's also the fact that he has a lot of henchmen with him that he's kind of buddy with. That
Right.
you know you wonder if you can even rely on them and Serie A as a whole. You know, everyone, all the owners, to make a collective, you know, come to, you know, hey, like we need to get this thing going because it's a bad look for us. I mean, even Lotito. I mean, obviously, I know how you feel, John, about that. You know, knowing him, he's a Lazio president, but he's one of Tavecchio's biggest backers. And you know, for me, you know, as long as you have, you know, the corrupt, you know, still those same, you know, controversial figures in charge, it's not going to be so much, oh, one guy's gone, now everyone's going to kind of buy in. Yes, you got the guys who are at fault, you know, to step aside or to get fired, but it's got to be a collective effort from the entire, you know, time football to buy in and make sure that this project, gets started and it's able to, as you mentioned earlier, with the 10-year project, get going.
Yeah, no doubt. So let me just throw you guys a question. So now that the figurehead of, basically corruption and archaic ways of approaching football is gone, Carlo Tavecchio resigns, what is one reform, maybe it's progressive, maybe it isn't, that you guys would like to see implemented under the new president? Obviously, it's difficult to hypothesize without knowing who's going to replace him. It might as well be a second kind of Tavecchio. Because as John mentioned, only 2 clubs in Serie A voted for Albertini and not Tavecchio. So, what are the odds that they really switch it? But if they do, what is one reform you guys would like to see implemented?
Marco, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think that what you guys said about the Germans, how they reinvented stuff, I mean, that's been really going around online a lot. And I actually just got the book so that I could read it. And I think that investment for the future, I feel like the way that we were so short term these past years, and again, I'm going to go to winning in 2006. And instead of thinking, how do we make sure Italy dominates? It was almost like a contentness with what we had instead of reinvesting, where I see Germans and they reinvest into their youth, where I don't think that Italy does. And that's a big problem that I have with this. And I want to see a president who comes in and doesn't just think about how do I get reelected. It's how do I make Italy stable? How do I make Italy great in 8 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? That's something I really want to hear.
And also have a sustainable model. So it's one thing to get back to being a powerhouse and to an elite team, elite country rather, but it's another to stay there and have a sustainable project and infrastructure. So, yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that I came about, when I looked at the entire thing and I thought about everything was, and like your point, you said 2006, they won. Okay. But to have that success, right? And how do you sustain that success? Not so much like, oh, we won our trophy. Now we're kind of allowed to kind of slip a bit and be a little bit lackadaisical in certain areas. To me, I don't like that. And I think, we can look at certain teams and certain nations who are prime examples of being able saying, hey, we're not content with just what we have. We're going to keep being competitive and being able to compete for top honors each and every year. Juve are one of the examples. I mean, even though they're losing guys when they lost, Pirlo, Tevez, Pogba, they're still building a sustainable model that will allow them to compete year in and year out. And then I think that's one of the problems we weren't able to see with Italy post 2006. Yes, they had the 2008 run against Spain, which Spain knocked them out. 2012, they made the final, got battered by Spain. Let's call it what it is. And then in 2016 under Conte, but they haven't been able to show, in a lot of ways, like Milan, that similar progress, that way back, like that 3 to 5 year plan that says, it's going to take time, but gradually we're going to get back and we're going to have something that's self-sustainable and self-sufficient. And we just didn't see it. So for me, I'd like to see something along the lines to what you just mentioned about youth and investing in them. Maybe go about the idea of having B teams. I mean, I think it's going to be easier said than done. Of course, it's going to take a couple years for that to even, come into play and be ready to roll out. But I think that's a good model to at least follow. This way you get your young players consistently playing against, competition at their level or above their level. I mean, it doesn't help when you have good young stars, in the Primavera sides playing with day in and day out. Players are just miles ahead of. And I think that's not the way you're going to grow. And that's not the way you're going to make our Italian youth from promising prospects with potential into first teamers.
Well said.
John, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of B-sides. I think, the way they do that in Spain is brilliant. I would love to see that. The Roma, a lot of their directors, their managers, coaches, whatever. One complaint that has always come out has always been the jump from Primavera to the first team side is just so huge that these players have this just massive gap that they're missing. So there's got to be a way to bridge that. I would love to see B teams implemented, especially in the lower tiers. I mean, we look at Serie B, Serie C. I mean, look at how many of those clubs have gone bankrupt in the last 3 to 5 years. So instead of having that, let's supplement that somehow. So let's get some B sides in there, sort of help with the transition from Primavera to first team football.
100%.
I'm sure that you hit the nail on the head there, because nowadays you look at, there's countless Italian talents in the Primavera sides that you hear about or you read about in La Gazzetta dello Sport, that when they're 16 years old, they're the next big thing. And then they go to through the Primavera system. And at about 18 or 19, maybe they get their debut for their big club, and they just simply don't look ready for the moment. And then they're loaned out to Serie B clubs. As you mentioned, the Serie B clubs are financially stricken, so at times they are poorly used. And without the co-ownership system in place, they frankly have no incentive to keep playing them if the results aren't there. So I think it is a flawed system, one that has contributed to Italy's downfall, as we saw, kind of like a generation within the squad missing. The B teams, as you guys all say, like, would go a long way, but I'm not exactly optimistic that they would implement them right away.
Oh, I don't think they would either. Yeah,
It's and anything that's gonna require a lot of backing from the owners and from everyone in the system. I mean, it's not going to be something as saying, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's start it tomorrow." It's going to be it's going to be maybe months, maybe years, and to restructure everything within a system. Something especially like B teams. I mean, it's not so easy as to just create a B team, throw our players in, and get on with it. It's going to take years, and I think that's what people are going to have to understand, that if Italy are to bounce back and start building towards the Euro and the next World Cup, like it's like there's got to be patience, and people have to understand that it's going to take time.
No, for sure. If you guys want, we can move on to recapping the past weekend of Serie A action. God knows it was a packed weekend. We had Roma-Lazio in the Derby della Capitale, followed by Milan-Napoli. That was a big one. And then yesterday in the morning, we saw Sampdoria take on Juve and defeat them. I would assume we're going to start from Roma-Lazio just because it was the first game of the weekend.
Yes, let's do it.
So let's hop right into it. As everyone knows, Roma beat Lazio 2-1 in this derby. Overall, it was a very interesting matchup. Immobile getting the consolation goal for the Biancocelesti. John, you're a Roma guy. What were your thoughts on this game, the result, the performance, anything that stood out to you?
I thought it was a fantastic performance by Roma. I get a little annoyed at times because, especially over the last year, I've seen a lot of praise, and rightfully so. I don't want to undermine that for Lazio's Simone Inzaghi, but man, Di Francesco has been absolutely incredible for Roma this season. They're exceeding expectations. In the summer, I sort of feel like his hiring was sort of met with some skepticism, and again, rightfully so. In his last season with Sassuolo, I think he underwhelmed, but what he's done in these last 2 weeks, in my opinion, has just been simply remarkable. I mean, what Roma did to Conte and Chelsea, and they've been on an absolute roll these last 2 weeks. So I can't say before the match that I was too worried. I was pretty sure they would get some sort of result, at worst a draw. But the performance was incredible. Defensively, they're so much more sound than they were last season with Spalletti. Their shape is far more credible, far more dangerous than it was with Spalletti. The high press has worked magnificently for them this season. Now, the thing that does worry me a bit is, Dzeko has sort of gone on a cold streak, but to see the goals coming from other players is fantastic. And Fazio, their central defender, said it earlier this morning when he appeared on the club's official radio station. But, I mean, they did not – Lazio had barely – I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I agree with him. He basically said Lazio had few chances, if any, to score a goal. I mean, if you take away that handball, I can't remember a clear-cut opportunity where I thought to myself, oh, gosh, they might bag a goal here. I thought defensively they were absolutely incredible. Nainggolan was head and shoulders above anyone on the pitch.
Absolutely.
And De Rossi, for as much stick as I give him, he was really, really, really good defensively.
After recent events, he was undoubtedly fired up for this one. It showed.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
to me, what stood out, and you mentioned it right towards the end, was Raja Nainggolan's performance. He dominated the midfield of Parolo and Milinkovic-Savic, two very good Serie A midfielders. He at the beginning of the season, Di Francesco kind of deployed him in a unfamiliar role to what he was accustomed to under Spalletti. So it took a bit of a getting used to period. But now it appears that he is in full flight back to his old, it's frankly scary form. Completely took control of this game and scored that goal. So all in all, lots to be hopeful about if you're a Roma fan.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Listen, he's playing a different role. Anyone who watches, you can see the way Di Francesco plays his midfielders. They're a little more towards the flanks, which, I mean, he's even admitted it's getting back to his old ways. That's where he played previously. But it was met with some criticism that Di Francesco did that, especially after the season he had last year. I mean, he was phenomenal, but he's going to have his opportunities to score. He's had chances this year. He's just missed them. But just the motor he has on him is something that it's just so hard to come by. I mean, I hate hyperbole when it comes to football, but he really does do things that maybe 5 to 7% of midfielders in the world do. I mean, he's everywhere. I just it's unbelievable the way he just flies up and down the pitch. I mean, he does things that I didn't even know could be done. The way he dispossesses the opponent is just something it's world class, absolutely world class.
May sound I don't. You would know what I'm about to say if it's true or not, because I watch Nangolan, but when I watch him in full flight, who he really reminds me of is Arturo Vidal in his prime at Juve, but arguably a bit better.
Yeah, a lot like that. Absolutely. Absolutely a sound comparison. And the thing is that's scary. It seems like the older he gets, the better he gets. I thought his first full season at Roma in 2014, 2015, I thought he was absolutely incredible then. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a fantastic player. But his last two seasons,
he's hitting other levels.
He's reaching an unbelievable level. And, I tweet some, I've been tweeting this fairly often, and sometimes it's met with some criticism, but I've been saying, the way he, his lifestyle, loves to smoke, loves to party, he drinks a lot, and he doesn't hide that. With the way he plays, I honestly thought his game and the way he plays, he'd be finished by the age of 30 or 31, but I mean, that does not look like it's going to be the case at all.
Marco, what do you think? I mean, that was a good shout there by Greg when he compared him to Vidal at Juve. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Do you think that's spot on? Do you think that's a little, perhaps,
I think
so much?
I think it's spot on. I mean, Vidal at Juventus was such a brilliant player to watch. He's that type that, like, if he's on your team, you absolutely love him, and when he plays against you, you're like, damn, like, I hate that guy, but I love that guy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Nangolan is a beast. I love watching him play. He brings an energy to the team. He was criticized, recently for not being at his best, but I think that he's still the top midfielder in Serie A. He brings so much energy to the team at a time where they needed it, especially in the derby. And just to touch upon that, I think that Roma absolutely deserved to win the derby. I thought they played really fantastic. They had more chances, like you said, than Lazio. And I think that Roma are just in that upper tier above Lazio and above a few other teams that are just fighting for that Champions League spot. And Di Francesco deserves so much credit, so much more credit than he was given when he signed. And that was me. I didn't think that Di Francesco could leave off where Spalletti left and really be able to improve this team. But I mean, what they did against Chelsea in the Champions League, what they do to win Lazio. I mean, if they beat Sampdoria with that game in hand, they could go to second place. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree. When Spalletti left, I mean, I was certainly disappointed, but I wasn't nearly as skeptical as maybe some others were when Di Francesco was appointed, simply because I think this is an area where people really sort of overlook it. But when I think when it comes to Roma, it's really important is he understands the environment. He understands the fans. He understands the expectations. I think we all know here, just, Roma fans, they're extremely demanding when they have no place to be. It's a very, very difficult place to work. So for him to understand the temperament that's needed to do well in the job, just because he played there, I think that's crucially important. And I mean, listen, he got criticized pretty early for the type of football they were playing, just because they weren't necessarily scoring a lot of goals. And, to an extent, I think some of that was fair. Defensively, though, I think they're absolutely fantastic. And when you couple that with the fact that, in my opinion, I thought the thing they needed most this summer was a central defender. They didn't get one necessarily that, I mean, we could say Moreno, but not exactly a huge out of this world purchase. For them to be doing this with Fazio and even Juan Jesus is astounding, in my opinion. Absolutely astounding.
I also, just to add on real quick, I also love the attitude that he transmits to this team. Man, I know you remember when we went to watch them live at Red Bull Arena against Tottenham. I mean, the way that he's on the sideline and screaming at his players, he reminds me of Conte a little bit, where he just gets the most out of his players. And yeah, like you're right, he's been criticized a little bit because maybe their football is not like that flashy. Who cares? You're playing effective football. You're winning games. You're doing great. I think Roma fans will be happy, and especially in the Champions League.
I think the one thing to add to, just not to go overboard here, but I think it also helps that Di Francesco, yes, they obviously Totti retired and everything like that, which also makes somewhat, in a way, Di Francesco's job a little bit more difficult, because he doesn't have that guy to kind of go into the locker room, or at least when you lose Totti, it's not really, yes, he's maybe not the same player he was, but you lose the advantage of that leadership and all those qualities that he could bring in the locker room. But having guys like De Rossi and Nainggolan and Dzeko and Florenzi, guys who have like leadership ability, it kind of helps, in a way, at least in my opinion, a guy like Di Francesco step into the role, because he has those leaders to lean on, maybe after a loss or after a tough game, or to get over maybe a difficult injury. And I think that also plays into this as well, when Di Francesco is coming from Sassuolo to Roma, and now he also has the pressure of playing in the Champions League. So I mean, again, Di Francesco's done an exceptional job, and I think Roma fans and Serie A fans in general, regardless of your affiliation, should just be, they should give him the credit he deserves for the start they've had.
Absolutely, Matt. I just want to quickly shift our attention to Roma's upcoming game in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid. As we know, Roma have already qualified for the round of 16. Right now they're on 8 points, with Chelsea behind them on 7. Atletico coming off a 0-0 draw to Real Madrid just this past weekend. It will be at the Wanda Nara, or the new stadium, the Wanda. What are your thoughts going into this game? How do you guys see it playing out?
It's tough to say, just because Atletico are not in good form right now. They're really having problems scoring. But wow, they're still a very strong team, and I'm trying to temper my optimism with Roma and just be like, oh, that team I'm so used to seeing in Europe is eventually going to sort of come forth. The one we've seen struggle, the one we've seen get battered at certain times. But, I mean, getting any sort of result would be absolutely fantastic, because really, I mean, I think we all can admit here, when the draw was made, I think we were all saying Roma to the Europa League almost at 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, it's not so much, yes, they have a clinched a spot in the round of 16, and that's something, but at the same time, you can't, fall back on that. You can't kind of have that contentness to your team. And I think that's kind of probably what Di Francesco's saying to his men. I think, yeah, it's great that you qualified, but we're not content with just qualifying and just getting to the round of 16. We want to be able to show that we're a powerhouse, we're legitimate, and we can make a deep run into the Champions League. So for me, I'm looking to see Di Francesco. I'm looking to see Roma as a whole, play the same type of football they've been playing, but not be lax, not be, again, content with what they've earned already. I want to see them play the same styles, play the same intensity, and at least get a good result in a difficult spot for teams to play. Atletico Madrid, as you just mentioned, yes, they're not in the best of form. Griezmann's been struggling, and that's been well documented. But I think it's, regardless of that, he's a player that can turn it on any time, and I think a team like Atletico can pick up form, and we know what they're capable of. So, I just want to see Roma bring it and get a good result.
I think,
Matt,
as Matt said,
sorry about that.
No, go ahead, Mark.
Just real quick, I think, Matt, you put a perfect point in there. That I think that often Roma has respected the other team a little bit too much in the Champions League, and they didn't have that kind of hunger or belief. And I just want to say that I really agree with that point.
Yeah, I was gonna add right there that I think Roma need a point here, just because if they get a point here at Atleti, I have Chelsea beating Karabag, so they're gonna hop ahead of them by 10 points. At 10 points, with Roma being at 9 with the draw, and then the final match day, Roma take on Karabag and Chelsea take on Atletico. So I feel like this point, whether it seems important or not, is vastly important, because it will make the difference between if they finish first or second in the group. As we know, that's very important in the Champions League, even though this year you have like Real Madrid qualifying as second. So there are some difficult second place teams, sure.
Yep. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think Roma really can't rest on their laurels here and really aim for that top spot, because it's well within their reach. Atletico, as you guys all mentioned, look vulnerable. Maybe not at the back, but going forward, they have looked devoid of any ideas. They have looked predictable. As John was saying about the Roma-Lazio game, about Roma as a whole this season, they've looked very solid at the back. So they have the necessary components to go to Atletico, to go to Spain and get a result, maybe like they have in past years. So to me, it's up to them that Di Francesco just goes ahead, tells them to go for that result, and they're going to get it if they have that mentality.
Yeah, I agree with you. The one thing that we've seen this year that has really been lacking, in my opinion, especially in the last few years with Roma in European play, has just been the attitude. Under Garcia, just the way they would approach a match, especially a big one, was absolutely, frankly, pathetic. They looked like they had no belief. They looked like they didn't have any ideas. They looked like they didn't even have they sort of went on there and sort of like bowed down to the competition. At times it was pathetic. Now under Di Francesco, they're finally playing with some grit. They're playing with some balls. I mean, I've been saying that, in my opinion, I think this has been their best Champions League campaign in almost a decade. Just because, I mean, a decade ago they beat Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. So I think that's the last time where they've actually appeared as, relatively strong in the Champions League. I mean, if you look at the performances they've put in during this group stage, I mean, they've been maybe one of the best 5 teams in the Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, it's just the group stage. I'm not saying they're the best 5 teams in Europe, but just in terms of performance, in terms of results, I mean, they've been one of the stronger teams. So, it's okay to be excited. I'm trying to temper it with they've been so poor in previous years.
Yeah.
My expectations are generally very low with Roma going into the Champions League, but they look like they have something, a different sort of attitude about them this year. So, I mean, they absolutely might as well go for it. I mean, they have nothing to lose.
John, real quick, I know you just mentioned, or Greg, you also been mentioning how good in the back they've been throughout this year. How much do you think that is attributed to the performance of Alisson in goal? Because it's been interesting when, Wojciech Szczesny was a good goalkeeper for them, when he was on loan for 2 years from Arsenal. And then when they lost him to Juve, or when he wasn't, his option or whatever it was, wasn't picked up and he went to Juve, there were some questions as to, is Alisson ready to take that next step, or was Skorupski going to maybe beat him out in the summer for the job? How big has Alisson been for that back line in terms of having that last line of defense to really rely on, because we saw that on how many occasions in the first match against Atletico where Alisson was my man of the match in that game. I definitely gave him credit on Twitter, but how important do you think he's been for them?
Oh, I think he's been vitally important. One area, in my opinion, and I mean, some can certainly disagree, where I think he is just infinitely better than Szczesny, are his reactions. His reaction saves are just incredible. I feel like he'll have a howler every now and then. I mean, what goalkeeper doesn't? I feel like Szczesny, though, was far more prone to those than Alisson is. So, he's just instilled so much confidence at the back. Now, I do think a lot of it has to do with the system. They do a high press. The players even admitted by them being able to do that, it makes it a little easier to defend. But I mean, that's not to take away anything from Allison. He has been phenomenal this season. I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of a goalkeeper in Serie A who's been stronger than him. He's a leader. He's been absolutely astounding. And you know, a lot of people were questioning when Roma let Szczesny go. You know, Matt, as you mentioned, Skorupski, a lot of people were tabbing him to potentially replace Szczesny as the number one. I'll be honest, I never believed that. I think he has a lot of flaws in his game. However, you know, for him to be at this level in his first season as a full-time starter in Europe, he's been absolutely incredible. And I don't know what more he could have done up to now. I mean, he's just instilled so much strength at the back there, and just looking throughout the season, I think the howler, we don't even need to call it a howler, just the mistake he had in the Derby. I think that might be his first one on the year. I can't point to anything else this season where it's been like, oh, you know, what is he thinking?
To me, as it relates to the Alisson situation at Roma, I think has played out exactly as planned to script, as Roma would have wanted. Take a season on the sidelines, learning from Szczesny, playing the occasional Copa matches, you know, getting used to life in Italy, playing for your national team ahead of Manchester City's Ederson. At the time, he was still at Benfica. That's a big thing in its own. We all know the CONMEBOL qualifiers, the World Cup qualifiers, are among the most difficult in the world. So he's already has that match experience. Then he gets his first full season with Roma as a starter in the Champions League and in Serie A. And as you guys both mentioned, he's performing brilliantly, a level above, frankly, what Szczesny was playing at, even though he was, as you guys both mentioned, again, that he was solid himself. So overall, I think Roma are very happy with his progression. But let's be honest, I think they planned it all out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, they get like that 1 year on the sideline to kind of just look at certain things, kind of be able to kind of, you know, understand how it is to play in Rome, understand how playing in Italy is different from anywhere else in the world. You do need that learning experience, and I think that while you'd like to rush certain promising players into roles and watch them hopefully shine, sometimes it's better not to rush to judgment and let, you know, players go through the motions and let them progress as they need to.
Absolutely. So, John, we know you need to go soon. So just before you go, what is your prediction for Roma Atletico? Give us a score.
I think actually John had to back out due to time constraints. So what we'll do is if you guys want to follow John, if you guys aren't already doing so, his Twitter handle is @Solano_56. You can find all of his work. You can find all his podcasts as well for AS Roma Press. We'll definitely be sure to include that in our notes for this podcast recording. Again, John, when you are listening to this, thank you so much for coming on. Greg and I really do appreciate it. So, Greg, what we'll do is we'll transition towards Juve Samp, and we got the main man Marco here to kind of take us into this one.
I'm still here, man. I got time.
What happened, Marco? I'm a Juve fan myself. I was at work and I saw the notification tickers coming in: 1-0 Sampdoria, 2-0 Sampdoria, 3-0 Sampdoria. It was ridiculous. I couldn't see the game myself. What did you think? What did you make of the game?
Oh, I'm a Juventus fan, right? But, you know, if anyone who knows what we do, you know, I'm a Serie A fan first. And Sampdoria is like my second team, literally. And honestly, as sad as I was that they were getting beaten 3-0 by Sampdoria at the point, Sampdoria completely deserved it. And anyone who says otherwise is crazy, because Sampdoria at 1-0, they were pushing for 2. At 2-0, they were pushing for 3. And the mentality that they have is really I'm going to go deep here. It's really what the smaller teams in Italy need to adopt. Like, not being scared of the champion, the Scudetto holders, taking the game to them and not stopping and sitting back at 1-0 and actually going for it. And maybe they stepped a little bit too much, and Juventus put Dybala in, who they're super dependent on, and they got 2 goals back. But I think that all credit goes to Sampdoria in this one.
No, absolutely. The way Marco Giampaolo has set up the Sampdoria side, despite losing key figures, Patrick Schick, Milan Skriniar, and the like, has just that everyone he's putting everyone has fit like a glove. You look at Lucas Torreira in the midfield. I know Matt has a well-documented bromance with him on Twitter, whether Torreira knows it or not. But
I'm in that one too with you, Matt.
There you go.
I think we're all Team Torreira on this side. He scored. I saw the highlight of his goal. It was a beautifully hit bottom corner strike past Szczesny. Could do nothing about it, really. Dennis Pratt, from what I heard, looked good. Napoli are looking at their former player Duvan Zapata scoring almost every big game he's played in the season. Will they regret that? We don't know. Everyone at Sampdoria right now is playing great.
Let me ask you this, Marco. First question is, I know you and your partner in crime there at IFTV, Michael, you guys, and I know Adama was there as well. You guys visited Sampdoria's facilities. You interviewed Luis Muriel. You had the whole video of Patrick Schick. Take us through what you saw with Sampdoria's facilities and their overall philosophies and everything like that you've taken from that trip, and how you feel that that's been it was kind of obvious in your way that they were onto something special, not only as in terms of marketing and everything like that, but in terms of what they were going to be accomplishing in the coming years on the field. What do you take from your visit there, and how you think it's kind of translating into success on the field?
Sampdoria is like, they came into my heart because obviously they were like the first club to give us a chance, to give IFTV a chance, and we were like super, super grateful for that. And just the way that they immersed ourselves in the culture of they made us fall in love with Sampdoria, and the way that they work, not just off the field, like you said, focus on the other perspectives, but the way that they think. And there's a sense of belief, especially with the coach, Giampaolo.
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with Giampaolo. They're obsessed with the system. They're not reliant on, okay, we got Muriel. We got to do what we got to do to keep him as long as we can and raise his price to 100 million. I'm referencing Cairo and Belotti. They're not dependent on just one guy. They are so much about the system. Skriniar, another beast that I feel like he's so amazing, amazing. And they're not scared to lose Sheik. We were speaking to them straight up. And I mean, now it's okay if I say it. They knew that Sheik is going to move on. They know that Muriel is going to move on. And what they're doing is it's about keeping that system together. And you could actually relate this to the national team, where they don't have that system that they believe in. It's all I keep hearing is, if we only had Balotelli play. But we shouldn't be relying on that. And I think that that's something that Sampdoria do extremely well.
I think it's funny you mentioned that too, because obviously the system and it allows players to succeed and everything like that. But I think it really it's a testament to Giampaolo's ability to kind of be that. If he doesn't look like the character that Conte is in terms of that erratic and that loud type of guy on the sideline, but he looks like a guy. He's for what we've seen on the field. I mean, these guys buy into everything he's saying. I mean, they work hard. Obviously we know they're unbeaten at home and they use their environment to their advantage. But even on the road a couple weeks ago, that was one of the matches I found fascinating. Was the game against Inter, where I think they were down 3-0, if I'm correct. They came back with 2 goals in the second half late. I think it was my boy David Karnowski, and they had Quagliarella. The way they go into big games, even on the road and, of course, obviously at home, is very impressive. I mean, for a young team to have that type of mentality and that type of attitude that fearless attitude towards bigger opponents, I mean, that comes from the coach, does it not?
To me, it's going to sound funny, but in this idea that their home is a fortress, the Marassi plays a part. I remember growing up as a kid and watching La Giostra dei Gol with the goal horns, and every time the Marassi would pop up as a kid, I would think holy crap, what is that stadium? It would look thunderous the whole time. So when these big teams come to town at the Marassi, like Juve have, like Milan,
you gotta bring it. Absolutely.
You know what? It's not an easy atmosphere. Then you couple the fact that they're trying to approach Calcio progressively with young talents, good scouting, a positive
veteran players. Quagliarella, they have Viviano, a veteran keeper. Those things help.
So with the team of performers, a progressive manager, a frankly entertaining president, to say the least, a fortress at home. These are all the key ingredients to successful Serie A that, like Marco was saying before, every team, like many teams in Italy that are not currently adopting this model, should look at Sampdoria and take notes.
100%. 100% agree.
So, as we know, Juve coming off a defeat to Sampdoria, they're going to take on Barcelona in the Champions League this coming week. Marco, what are your thoughts on that game? It's at the Juventus Stadium. Do you think they're going to lose 3-0 again like they did in the first game this season, or is it going to be a closer affair?
Well, this was a tough one to accept. You know, not because Sampdoria didn't deserve it, but because of the attitude of a lot of the players and the team as a whole. You know, I don't know if they were thinking about Barcelona this week already. Did he have his head there? He was resting a few players, obviously. No, I mean, Juventus are so unpredictable. I was about to tell you that it's not going to be a 3-0, and I know it's not going to be 3-0, but it's just which Juventus is going to come out. Is the switch going to be flipped? And the Juventus, where we're like, wow, they're so effective. They move together. They're actually defending well. Is that going to be the Juventus that comes out against Barcelona? Or is it going to be the Juventus that we've seen has been starting the seasons like this and then scrape through and then start to build? And I think, honestly, I don't know. I would hope that Juventus are going to come out with the right mentality, and because they need to. This is a crucial game. I never like to be one of those fans who's like, oh, it's Barcelona, we should be happy to just tie. Like, no, you're also Juventus. Barcelona is a team that in the past we've beaten, and that should be the mentality. It's not just let's scrape a win, a tie. And I hope that that's a Juventus that comes out.
To me, when you say we don't know which Juventus side's going to show up, is it going to be the one that they just flip a switch and all of a sudden they're that well-oiled machine again? To me, in recent years, when they struggled, the flipping of the switch was either a formation change or Allegri really lashing into key players and relying on them and then them performing. So to me, we saw from the 3-5-2 go to the 4-2-3-1, then we made it all the way to the Champions League final. This year, the 4-2-3-1 is being exposed because, frankly, the midfield isn't up to snub, isn't what it used to be. So I would like to see a formation change. I think that's what will flip the switch for this Juventus side. A midfield three is necessary with Pjanic, Marquisio, Khedira, whoever's really fit, because as we know, there's some well-documented injury concerns in the middle. And then you just let Dybala and Mandzukic play a le spalle of Higuain, and I think that's the best way to set it up. This will wake them up because right now they look way too vulnerable in the middle of the park when I understand we highlighted all the positive stuff about Sampdoria, all their offensive talent, the way they play, but Sampdoria shouldn't be opening you up for that many chances if you're a true contender in Europe.
I agree.
Well, I mean, let me just add to that. So I think that's a good point, and pointing out the midfield issues, Greg. But I mean, how much do you think of, and you know where I'm going with this one, that they're missing the loss of they're missing that additional defensive presence in a guy like Bonucci, though he hasn't been playing that well for Milan. But I mean, everyone knows that they're scoring more goals this year that they have in the previous years at this point. I think they're the top scoring team in Serie A, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
But they're also conceding way more goals, and you know, they conceded 2 against Udinese, they conceded 3 against Sampdoria. I mean, what do you think exactly is the main reason? Is it they don't have Bonucci? Is it another year that Barzagli and Chiellini, they're getting a year older? Is it Lichtsteiner, Asamoah, the loss of Dani Alves, maybe Sandro slip in form? What do you think's the biggest issue for them?
I think it's a whole number of factors that combine to one overlapping theme here. So yes, you mentioned the loss of Bonucci. You also mentioned the loss of Dani Alves, the right back, not exactly Mattia De Sciglio, Stefan Lichtsteiner, or Sturaro, who's played there, not exactly stepping up. Alexandro hasn't exactly been himself. The midfield has looked lackadaisical at times. But the overlapping theme here is that Juve in the final third, in my opinion, do not play with a clear identity. Sometimes they force the ball wide to Cuadrado or Mandzukic, and they try and whip in a cross. Or if that doesn't work, they reboot and go to the other side. To me, then you look at a club like Napoli, you look at the Roma, they're attacking with clear ideas. You look at Spalletti's Inter, there's a common theme to their offensive play. There's cohesion, there's a pattern. Mm-hmm. Right now, Allegri is relying heavily on individual brilliance. As Marco said, Juve brought on Dybala, we got 2 goals.
Mm-hmm.
if Juve are to have success at the level that they want to, winning the Scudetto, competing for the Champions League this season, there's going to need to be Allegri instilling a fresh identity or something new in the final third, or else we're just going to keep seeing the same Juve rolling out the same uninspiring form. Yes, we're scoring more goals, but look who the goals are coming against. Look who the losses are coming against. Any tough opponent. To me, it's a whole number of things.
Marco, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I do. One thing that I kept saying, we hosted a viewing party in New York City for this game, for Sampdoria versus Juventus. And obviously there was a lot of Juventus fans, and then there was a lot of like the Milan fans who were like supporting Sampdoria, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to everyone and seeing all Juventus fans like so pissed and this and that, to me, the anger, I have this belief that in what Allegri said one time, where he said, you need to understand that there are 2 seasons in the Serie A.
Mm-hmm.
There's August to January, and there's February to May. Right now, what's important is to keep going, to pick up results, not to play well, this and that. In May is when you need to pick up the results, play well, and get that gap. He's like, right now, you just need to stay in that race, right? And that's exactly what Juventus are doing, and that's exactly what Juventus under Allegri have been doing. And I think that Juve, I'm not worried for May because Juve has the deepest squad in Italy. Right now, they're not showing it. But just like a few other years, once they start showing it, they show it. And I think that the likes of Napoli, who are brilliant, and I love watching Napoli, they play beautiful football. The top 3 are absolute magicians. Insigne is unbelievable to watch. If one of those 3 get hurt, they do not have the same kind of depth that Juventus do. Even if the depth right now is not showing the quality, it's that moment, like I said, when the switch is flipped, and then Juventus just start running away with this. So I'm not nervous for May. I'm nervous, how long is it going to take until that the switch is flipped? And can you stay in the Champions League? Because right now, with a few bad results, I mean, Juventus is in danger of going to the Europa League. I hope everyone knows that that's actually a possibility. And there's not that disrespect for, like Italy. I'm going to reference this again. We are Juventus. We need to be into the next round of the Champions League. Just like they did against Sampdoria. Like, we are Juventus, so we should beat Sampdoria. Yeah. But no, you also need to earn it and put out a good display on the pitch too. It's not that you're just going to be given anything. And the levels in Italy have risen. And I think that gap has gotten smaller. And I think that it's a number of factors. It's a balance between everything that you mentioned, Matthew. It's not one single thing. It's the mixture of multiple things.
I think you raised some very interesting points and all valid points. It's a matter of when will Juve peak this season, or if they're just going to have to redefine themselves and then kick into another gear. I think those are great points. So
also, just to add to that, Marco, is that, yes, you want to be able to play in your best season, best football later in the season. But Juve, these next coming weeks, for at least in my opinion, are going to be telling as to what type of Juventus do we see this year. Because yes, they have Barcelona coming up in the Champions League. I'm not too sure who they have on the weekend, but next Friday, Friday 2:45, they're actually against Napoli at the San Paolo, which is a fantastic game, and that's going to be something that people want to keep an eye on. That's going to be a match that if Napoli are able to win, they can get that further separation. But if Juve are able to come away with maybe a win, or because they're capable of it, now it changes the spectrum a bit. Or is Juve going to make that climb back to the top? And obviously we know with the Serie A race this year, those top 4 teams, I mean, they're neck and neck. They're fighting tooth and nail for 1 through 4. So that's the game that's going to be very interesting for me to see in the coming weeks.
And listen to who they have after Napoli. They got Olympiacos in the last game of the group stage. So that's going to be a big one. And then right after Olympiacos, they have Inter in the league. Another team vying for that Scudetto right now.
Very tough stretch for them entering the winter break.
It's going to be an intense few weeks from a Juventus perspective. A lot will define what their season plays into, if they fall out of the Scudetto race, or as Marco mentions, they fall out of the Champions League. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So moving on to our next game of Serie A this week, Milan, Napoli. as we know, the Partenope winning this one 2-1. Insigne on the score sheet. Matt, you're a Milan guy. What happened in this one?
It's kind of feels like it's the same old stuff. I mean, for me in this game, it was a little bit different than it was, unlike in previous games or throughout most of the entire year so far. I feel that Milan, they brought a better second half performance than it looked as though they would bring. But I think it was kind of a little bit too late. I think they started to string together some good chances in the second half, and I don't know if that was directly attributed to the fact that Napoli were pressing early and often in the first half, and maybe they were a little bit tired, so they kind of sat in and welcomed some pressure. But I don't know what it is. I think for me, Montella got the midfield set up wrong. I mean, I know he didn't have Biglia to go to for a full match, and not while he hasn't been playing well. And Milan don't have the depth, all over the field to, afford to lose guys. So he went with Montolivo, Kessie, who's been struggling since, early part of the season, and then Locatelli in an advanced role, which kind of odd to me. I don't have an issue with him trying Locatelli in a different role to find minutes for him consistently, but I don't think this was the game to do it, and this was the environment to do it. You're kind of throwing him in an unfamiliar role in a very difficult environment to travel towards. And for me, that's what I think most people were kind of upset about. Also, the fact that Bonaventura was playing as like a left wing back since coming off from his injury. He is one of their most creative players, in my opinion. But I think when you start going to like a 3 in the back formation, now you kind of look to see where you can throw Bonaventura, and I guess that was the only place he could have thrown him into, which to me was a risk to begin with. But I was, which also frustrates me as well, and I'm sure you guys will add to this, is they're so heavily dependent on Suso for results and for goals and everything like that, that they, then they don't have the midfield creativity. You'd think that they would start a guy like Silva, who is a little bit more tactically flexible than Nikola Kalinic, to at least help out in the midfield, kind of work one give and goes with Suso and do things like that. And I think you can argue if it wasn't for Suso getting injured, Silva probably would have been coming on maybe in the last 10 minutes again, which kind of has been a reoccurring theme the entire year, which is very frustrating to see because I think it's clear that Silva's got potential. He's got ability. And from everyone I talked to in Portuguese football prior to his move over, he's got heaps of quality. It's just, it's taking time for him to adapt. But if you're not creating the chances in the midfield and Kalinic is not burying the few that he's given each match, you got to change something. And for me, it's to not play Silva more often, to at least try and maybe win over the fans in some ways. It's baffling to me.
Yeah, I want Marco's thoughts on this one, because as I watch Milan, I can't help but notice that Frank Kessie looks like a shade of his former self. Last year, we all know that he had a career year with Atalanta, both in terms of the goals, his impact on the team, and just even defensively. Now at Milan, looks a bit lost in the midfield. Some technical deficiencies really hurting him, holding it back here. Marco, do you think he's going to regain his past form, or do you think the Milan move was a bridge too far for the youngster?
I think he's definitely going to regain his form, and I know my partner Mike, he would disagree because he's not the biggest fan, and as of right now he's been pretty correct. But I think that Kessie is a fantastic midfielder, and I think the problem at Milan is, or the disappointing thing I should say, is that yes, you're playing Napoli, you're playing the top team, and on the score it was 2-1, right? And in the second half they definitely looked better than the first. But I still feel like there's this disappointment in the fact that there's never a chance that you could really beat them. You know what I mean? Like with Sampdoria, for example. Like they believe that Sampdoria fans can believe that there's a chance to beat a Napoli, to beat Juventus, to beat Inter, to beat these top teams. And I feel like you don't have that with Milan. I feel like it's almost become expected that they have to lose this. And I'm not blaming them for losing against Napoli and Juventus. And I would say that, if they want to get into a Champions League spot, which is the goal, you don't have to beat Napoli and Juventus. But I'm saying from another perspective, I feel like there's that lack of that. And I think it's such a problem, especially for Milan fans. The guys I was talking to yesterday, it's like, yeah, we knew we were going to lose. It's just like, how much are we going to lose by? And that's what it's become. And it's understandable. You need to, crawl, walk, and then run. But I don't know.
No, for sure. For sure.
mean-
You look at this Milan side, and they don't have they look at Sampdoria, as you mentioned, a side with Giampaolo's given not as many tools as say Montella, and he's still making something of it. Where Milan, more should be expected from it. It's the same thing every year. If you look at that, like it's the same uninspiring group of individuals in that midfield. Sure, they make a few signings, but as Matt mentioned, without Suso in the final third, they're predictable and they struggle. Yes, he's the former Liverpool man has stepped up his game, but it's time for other players to come into this picture. Matt mentions Andre Silva. Now Bonaventura's back from injury. He's always a creative force in that midfield. So I think Milan, the only real way is up from here, but I feel like we say that every other time they pick up a loss.
Yeah, it's frustrating to see, and I think I think a lot of it was. I think a lot of this, to your point, Marco, like these expectations that Milan fans now have entering difficult games like this past weekend against Napoli, is that they have this expectation that they're not going to bring the right mentality, they're not going to bring a winning desire, and that's been proven true. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that they spent so much, and they had these expectations, and they had this. I always say it's. The higher you climb, the longer the fall. And I think that's what kind of happened with Milan fans in a way, is that they have these expectations that they're going to finish top 4 and then maybe, which I didn't believe it to be true, but maybe compete for the Scudetto, which was definitely, extending further than they were able to reach. But now when you're really seeing the bigger picture and you're seeing the defeats to not only the biggest sides, but dropping points and things like that to smaller provincial sides, it's kind of like a reality check. And I thought the reality check for Milan, where they would begin to turn it around, was that defeat to Lazio. That was really their first big test of the year. And Lazio slapped them around 4-1. Bonucci didn't look good. And as a whole, the team looked very bad. And I thought that was going to be the moment where Milan fans, Milan as a whole, Montella, everyone top to bottom, would finally say, all right, we got our punch in the face. Now we're going to get up, and now we're going to rebound. We're going to show them what we're made of. That we're not an expensive team with a bunch of good names on paper. We're a cohesive unit who can play good, effective football. And that's what we haven't seen. I don't know if when we're going to be seeing it this year. It feels like every week it's one thing or another. But yeah, I think that was the initial reaction that I take from each and every week, is that I think it's clear that it's going to get much worse. It's going to be worse before it gets much better. And I think that's something that Milan fans have to live with, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just piggyback. Then you look at their crosstown rivals, Inter, who are having a phenomenal season. Spalletti coming in the summer. I saw you tweet yesterday, Matt, that Spalletti to Inter was some of the best business in Italy, and I can't help but agree with you on there. They have 10 wins and 3 draws without any defeat so far, fighting for that Scudetto. So you look at Milan, a side who, after spending almost something like over 200 million in the summer transfer window, everyone thought they were going to be on the upswing, but in the end, it's their crosstown rivals Inter that, with a few key signings in the midfield, adding Skriniar at the back, really changed their fortunes.
Oh, absolutely. And again, Marco, definitely, like you'd like to chime in on this. It's amazing how much, we talked about Giampaolo, we've talked about Sarri, we talk about all these Di Francesco as well, how important the manager is for a team's success, regardless of the quality of talent you have on the team sheet. And that's for me, that's the difference this year from Inter, because if you look, most of the Inter fans, at least that I interact with daily and throughout the entire summer, they liked the appointment of Spalletti. They knew he was a very good coach from his time at Roma, but they really didn't feel that they had the make the right moves. I mean, if you remember all the projected transfer window accounts put out, we're going to get James Rodriguez, Arturo Vidal, and they started naming all these big names, and they really didn't land that huge name, which kind of disappointed Inter fans. But you're quickly seeing that, it doesn't matter. It's not the direct, results don't directly come from the quality you have, but you also have to have a good manager to really get that team to play to the next level. And we're seeing that with Spalletti. I mean, they didn't really make a tremendous amount of splashes, but we're seeing it early on that even D'Ambrosio's hitting a better level and is playing, is really having his involvement in some big matches from Skriniar that you just mentioned earlier has been a fantastic surprise for them. Though he was very talented at Sampdoria, I don't think many Inter fans were expecting him to be this good, this quick. So I just want you to touch, what do you think of Spalletti's job so far and Inter as a whole?
Listen, Spalletti's gotten Nagatomo to not look that bad. I find that absolutely hilarious, and I love that. Forza Nagatomo, that guy's a legend. No, but on a serious note, I think that what we kept saying was, oh, Milan on paper looked brilliant, right? And every day in the summer, we kept posting match recaps. I mean, not match recaps, sorry. We kept posting transfer news, and every day it was a Milan fans were like, yes, this is awesome. We're linked to Pelocchi, we're linked to this, we're linked to that, blah, blah, blah. And Inter fans will comment, oh my God, Milan are signing Bonucci, Milan are signing Bia, Milan are signing Kessie. What are we doing? We're not doing anything. We're signing this no-name Skriniar. We're signing Vecino for 24 million.
Dalbert,
but the thing that happened that everyone overlooked was that Spalletti was the top signing of the summer. He was a top signing in all the Serie A this summer. No one made a better move than signing Spalletti. I mean, you could argue it, but you guys get where I'm going with this one. At least for Inter, that was the best signing that they could have done.
No,
better than signing one player.
Especially with the fact, I agree with you. And then, Greg, you want to chime in. I agree with you, especially with the fact that how the revolving door they had at the bench last year with, everything that happened with De Boer. Then they brought in Pioli and everyone like that. I mean, it's just, when he starts bringing stability to the bench, I mean, you get not only, I mean, it also helps to the fact that they actually gave their coach more than 3 weeks to work with an entire team, unlike they did with De Boer. So hats off to the ownership there for that, which was pretty much common sense.
True.
But yeah, when you give a coach that much time to work with the team, to instill his tactics and his mentality and his approach onto his team, and you have the matches and you have the time to do that and to tinker and to adjust and to see what works. I mean, everyone knows Spalletti's a great coach. Like it's clear he's a motivator. He's tactically intelligent. He's got all these qualities about him that it doesn't surprise you when you see how good Inter's playing. But the one thing I've been saying about Inter is that even in some of their victories, some of them have been narrow. I think there was a game a couple weeks ago or maybe last month. I forgot who it was against. Was it Bologna where they barely won 2-1 maybe? That they have another level that I think they'll hit this year. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on what they do in January, because I think that now that they have that financial fair play thing, out of the picture for them, I think now it's going to be interesting to see that based on their position, what they do in January to make sure that they do get back to that Champions League and they don't collapse in the second half. Because as we all know, Serie A, the top 5, top 6 teams, I mean, it's going to be very tight, and it could come down to a team like Roma having to play additional fixtures in the Champions League versus a team like Sampdoria or Lazio maybe even having to play additional fixtures. So for me, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Inter do in January. Now, if I know many people mentioned they need a defender, they maybe need another midfielder. I've heard rumors about Pastore. So, what do you think they would need to do in January to sustain this success and to ultimately finish top 4? What do you think they need?
Well, in my opinion, they absolutely need another center back because right now their depth over there isn't great. If something happens to Skriniar or Miranda that would sideline them long term or a couple of weeks over a crucial stretch, they're going to have to turn to Andrea Ranocchia. We all know how that one's going to end up. So if they don't add a center back, potentially another fullback, depending on the progression of Dalbert, depending on how D'Ambrosio continues to play.
What about a Cancelo? Where is he at? Is he still? I mean,
is he a right? Could he overtake Candreva on right wing? I know he played there often at Valencia. Candreva, well, his struggles, his recent ones at least with the Azzurri, are well documented. So maybe he slots in there. But more than anything, and I think most Inter fans would agree that they're going to need some depth at the back.
Marco, would you agree there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also I went on a podcast actually earlier today, which was main focus is on the well talked about leagues, Premier League and such. And they asked just to give a recap of like what's been going on in the Serie A for people who don't watch it much. And they asked me if I think Inter could push for the Scudetto. And I think that expectations, just like you said, Matt, about Milan, are similar for Inter. This Inter is not made for the Scudetto, in my opinion. You could disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
This is my opinion. I don't think they're not made for the Scudetto. They're made to get into the Champions League. They're overperforming almost at this point. And I think that when they do dip form, because I believe that they will, it's not a moment to get scared of. It's normal, you know. So I think that expectations also need to be put there. And I'm all for dreaming, you know, but I'm trying to speak as a realist. And I think that they need to be consistent. I think under Spalletti they can be, but there's also going to be that point where it's like Napoli and Juve and Roma are also consistent. They also have a deeper bench, and they're also a little bit more experienced. So I think also managing expectations is important.
Absolutely. It also helps when you have a player you praised in your recent video for IFTV, Mauro Icardi, 13 goals in 13 games. I mean, when not only is he a great scorer, and he's been for several years now for Inter, but when it's coming from the captain, it looks a little bit better, because it's saying, okay, not only is he our leader, but he's also the guy, he's the guy that kind of can win games for us, even when we may not be playing to our best level or our best potential. And I think that's so important for a team like Inter trying to fight for the Champions League, because when you, to your point, when you do have a slip in form, or a bad defeat or anything like that, you tend to lean on the captain. You tend to lean on your stars to carry you and pretty much say, I got this, or I'm not going to let us slip. I'm going to make sure that we rebound and we carry on and we do what we came here to do. And I think that's so important with Inter and Icardi. I mean, yeah, it's one thing to be a great player, but it's also to have that be in the form of your captain. And I think that's so important for Inter and what they're trying to do this year. I believe I actually picked Icardi to win the Capocannoniere, which is possible, but I think that would be something. Just as me getting way ahead, but I mean, what if Inter were able to qualify the Champions League and Mauro Icardi, the captain, won the Capocannoniere? I mean, that would be quite the impressive feat. A guy of his caliber getting his team as a captain to the Champions League after a couple years out, that would be something.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, I'm actually looking at IFTV's Instagram here, and you guys just posted a picture. Well, actually yesterday, about the standings, and I see how clustered it is at the top right now. You got Napoli on 35, Inter behind them on 33, Juve in third on 31, then obviously Roma, Lazio respectively with a game in hand, 30 and 28. So for you guys, if Inter are built for the Champions League and not the Scudetto, which I agree with, who is fighting for the Scudetto out of these five teams? You got Napoli, Juve, and Roma, or do the other teams factor in at all?
I think Juventus, Napoli, and Roma, like you said. Are there possibilities that others can? Yes, but I don't see it happening. Just like in 2011 when Juventus won, they were probably out of the rankings a little bit, but then Conte was like that external factor that you could have never included in there. So definitely something could happen. But for me, it's those three, and more specifically, and I might get some hate for this, Napoli and Juve.
Okay. No, I would generally agree with that, because you look at Juve, as you mentioned, trying to find the right formula. Maybe they're trying to peak later. Roma, we need to see more. That's all I'm going to say. Napoli, bona fide contenders. They're there. They're the favorites, in my opinion. And you, Matt?
I agree with Marco for the most part. I do think it's going to be the top four. I think Roma, Inter, Lazio, Napoli are going to be the top four teams in some way, form. I'm not too sure yet. I think a lot of things can change. I think there's going to be some jockeying between those 1 to 4 spots. And I think to include in there is Lazio. But for me, although they have exceeded my expectations this year and they've looked very impressive, they beat Juve in a match. They actually beat Juve in, the Super Cup this past summer. I don't believe they still have enough to sustain this, even when you do take into account that they are in the Europa League. I felt that I'm actually pretty shocked. Not shocked because I knew they have a good team, but I didn't think they were going to be this good this year when they lost Biglia and Keita. I didn't think they had the depth, but Simone Inzaghi's been a fantastic manager. But I think it's going to be one of those years where the top 5 teams, they're so tightly condensed at the top of the table that any poor form from a team like Lazio can really kind of deflate their chances of a top 4 finish, at least in my opinion. Again, I think the 4 teams that will make the Champions League, Roma, Inter, and Napoli, and Juve.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, having said all this, that wraps up basically our Serie A coverage of the past weekend, our Serie A title race as a whole. Obviously, a big day in Italian football today. Tavecchio resigns, to reiterate and remind the fans that maybe living under a rock and didn't see that news. All kinds of reaction there. Marco, thank you for coming on so much. I can't tell you enough how much of a pleasure it is. We're going to need to do this again soon.
Thank you so much. We're here anytime. We appreciate coming on. Keep up the great work, guys.
And Marco, real quick before you head out, did you where can people find your work? What are you working on? You just briefly to kind of give some fans or listeners a little bit of idea what you have in the pipeline.
Well, thanks for giving me the plug. But yeah, Italian Football TV, IFTV on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all that good stuff. We're there, and we're just looking to more so now connect the North Americans and the culture of Serie A back together. So if you're interested in that and like cool content, that's what we try to do.
Perfect. Thank you again, Marco, for coming on. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Ciao.
Ciao.
And on that note, with Marco heading out, this is a wrap for the third episode of Italian Football Daily's podcast. Of course, we hope you enjoyed it, all the Serie A and Calcio talk. But more than anything, we want to hear from you. What did you guys think? What do you guys make of the title race in Italy? Are you guys happy with Tavecchio's resignation? All in all, let us know. Your feedback is important. And on that note, for Matthew Santangelo and Gregory Caltabanis, it has been a pleasure. Peace.
Later.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Awesome. That was. I mean, it was a little bit longer, but I mean, I think we covered our bases quite well.
Awesome stuff, guys. Thanks for having me. Really.
No problem, Marco. We'll make sure. What we'll do is once we tweet out the link with our iTunes with the podcast, we'll tag you, we'll tag John, and then yeah, you can do whatever you want with the link and so on and so forth.
Cool. Yeah. Just don't feel the need to tag me or my personal account. You could just tag IFTV. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Really.
All right, man. See you later. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Ciao.
All right, Greg. So was there anything in the thing? Because I know that, which is called John, like all of a sudden I was looking at, he like kind of like bounced out without like.
I'm gonna edit that out.
Okay. Did you want me to keep the part where I give him his plug, or do you want to take that
absolutely.
out?
No. I'm gonna, because if I'm not mistaken, because now go.
I think we're still live, by the way.
Yeah, I don't